Hey, what's up, Agent? It's me, Agent SD3 of SD3 Entertainment, and today I'm joined by one of my first friends here on YouTube, the myth, the legend, that man GohanOXG.
Yo, thanks for having me, Agent. Oh, I should be calling you that now instead of Sano because that's the name I used to go by, but thanks for having me. It's been a minute.
Yeah, man, it is good to have you here and to just do a video with you. I think the last time we did a video together, or rather the first one we did together was in 2012.
Oh my god, 6 to 7 years going on of history now.
So today Gohan and I are just playing some Jump Force, and we're just going to look back on the Naruto franchise, but specifically the character of Naruto, because this is a shonen that's been pretty near and dear to a lot of people, but you know, like most shows that have gone as long as Naruto has, which it debuted in the US in 2005, it's going to have its fair share of issues.
Become an agent and subscribe to SD3 Entertainment today.
So Gohan, if you had to describe the character of Naruto, how would you describe him?
In some areas, I would definitely describe him as like a misfortunate underdog in some areas, given like, and I know this topic brings up a lot because a lot of people like to deem Rock Lee as the underdog, like a real top underdog of the series, and that's true. He definitely is one of them. But when you take into consideration all that has happened to Naruto, despite it all being lined up with destiny, still, I think it still kind of gives off somewhat of an underdog element, personally. So
okay.
I feel like that brings, and he's like a traditional shonen character. Never gives up, tenacious as hell, and is drived to his goal. I feel like starting out in part 1, he had a lot built on him, like a lot of a good foundation built on him, but I feel like Shippuden was what started to switch that around as far as like his goals and how he went about certain things, and he never stopped as far as wanting to become Hokage. That's one thing he was definitely consistent with, that he stuck with. It's just that once it got near the end, when it came to him wanting to become Hokage, because I know Shippuden did episodes covering that, because ultimately what Naruto expected out of being Hokage wasn't what he thought it was going to be, so he kind of ended up becoming, I guess, the same thing Tsunade ended up being when she became it.
Yeah, you know, the weird thing about Naruto's character is, like, his goal, like most shonen characters, you know, like Goku's, for example, is just being strong. Luffy's is getting the One Piece, and Ichigo is just protecting his friends. Naruto's is one of the most tangible. It's just acquiring the rank of Hokage. And
right.
I think as a premise, it's great. It's just, like you said, the road to getting there was really convoluted unnecessarily, and things got... I don't even want to use the word difficult, but just unnecessarily complicated.
Right.
And his character seemed to kind of float up and down when it came to Shippuden, to me. Part 1, this notion of hard work and just kind of like being the best through sheer willpower was so prevalent in the first one that I think, to me, it's what really made Naruto a likable character.
Right. And there's like a certain just element that part 1 held to it, but I had watched a video that somebody did covering over like a perspective on Naruto's character. A channel called Plague of Gripes that did a video called Naruto the Self-Made Hypocrite, and it pointed out a lot of things where it's kind of a half and half with Naruto, because while yes, he definitely had a lot of hard work, he had a lot of lineage stuff going behind him, because he was a child born of, you know, Uzumaki and Namikaze, and his whole lineage pretty much went down to the grandson of God, the series interpretation of God, and not to mention the freaking red fox inside of him that gives him so much reserve of chakra.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is, like, part 1, to me, it really felt like you could get behind him because he felt like a nobody. And then as time went on, you find out, nah, this man is far from a nobody. It's just nobody really talked to him about his past, which is a problem in and of itself. We're not really going to get into that today. But, yeah, I think that he is definitely the self-made hypocrite in just the way that his character functions. And I think a discussion that I've often had with you guys and the rest of the squad is about how Neji was right.
Destiny.
About Destiny being everybody is destined for a certain purpose. And in part 1, it was really cool to see Naruto fighting Neji and how he basically was fighting for, I control my own destiny, and that's that sort of spiel. But then you reach part 2 of the series and you find out that basically everything that Naruto's been through was predetermined.
Right.
More or less. Ignoring, and yes, he found his friends and did all this other stuff on his own to form those bonds, but at the end of the day, he was destined to do that. Therefore, it raises the question of, but that was going to be his role anyway. So how does that hard work factor into prophecy?
Right. I feel like for my take on that, I think it's more so that I think the end goal, which I guess was ultimately the Hokage revival and him meeting Hagoromo and gaining the power of Ashura, I feel like the end goal was the main thing that was set for Destiny, but not every single little detail of that road to that was premeditated, but I think Naruto might have altered some of the paths, but the paths still led to the same end off. I feel like that's how it was.
True, I agree. I definitely think that is part of was part of the character. And the weird thing is, though, despite that, I found that he was a believable character. I just thought that the world around him had some issues.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that the world around him, it started to revolve around him too much. And I think that part of why part 1 worked is that the story, yes, Naruto's the main character, but the universe did not revolve around him doing everything.
Right. There was so many awesome different people's perspectives that kind of still led back to Naruto, his lineage or his family or something like that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that him as a character, he's an interesting conundrum come the second half of the show. But talking about the show, let's just go ahead and move into talking about the actual series. Just a curious question, Gohan. When did you start watching Naruto?
I had checked it out around the time when it initially came on Toonami. I want to say that was around 2004. I believe that's when it came on Toonami, so that's when I had started it.
Okay, cool. Same time as me, because it was 05. I think it was September.
05,
of
okay.
05. Yeah. And for you, what would you say was the most memorable moment of the first part of the series?
Of the first part, I know one of the moments I still go back to a lot of the times is, okay, if I had to say in terms of, let's say, I guess an arc, the Chunin exams for sure, hands down, I think one of my highlight moments of it was Lee versus Gaara, Naruto versus Kiba, Naruto versus Neji, and Naruto versus Gaara, I would venture to say.
Okay, I think for me, one of the main things that I think about, or that I reflect on in that series and love to go back and watch, was Zabuza's fight with Kakashi the second time around. Well, the first time around, actually, because we got to see a lot of how the show's real fights would work. Because up until then, we kind of got, play fights and skirmishes and nothing serious. I think for me, it was in that moment that I realized, oh, okay, this show is about to be the shit. Because these fights are really technical, and they're not about who can make the biggest boom, which is a phrase that I've used a lot.
That's when it started. The strategy started to roll in.
Right. And for me, and you guys, in the comments, can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was one of the few shows that was airing on TV at the time that used that formula of actual strategy and technique and ability, vice, Kamehameha waves and planet busting.
Just power alone.
Right. And I think for me, that's what really worked about part 1, was the power scaling and just the intricacies of each fight, and that they didn't get too crazy and godlike. What about for you? Is that kind of the same sentiment you have about part 1?
That, and because of the fact that, like I said earlier about Naruto, with a lot of the other characters, part 1 built a foundation on a lot of those characters and gave them a lot of potential. And that's what Shippuden didn't capitalize on, because it basically became the Naruto Sasuke show, or the Team 7 show. The only real member of the Konoha 11 that really got some kind of memorable shine would be Shikamaru. But a lot of the center focus goes on just the two main characters. But part 1 gave something to go off of for a lot of the other characters.
Yeah, for sure. I think that part 1 gave us a world, and really gave us the ability to explore it.
Right.
And I think where the series started to go wrong wasn't with the existence of part 2. I thought Shippuden was fine up until really we got into the pain stuff. For me, I think right around that point, the series started to take a turn. The fights, to me, became a little less intricate in terms of skills and jutsu being used.
Right.
And it started to become a little bit too much like Dragon Ball Z. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but the precedent set before with everything else in the show really didn't prime you for that sort of escalation of power.
Right.
And I don't know, something about after the pain arc, things just really came apart.
Yeah, I think, I think a lot of people would say this, and I can kind of agree. I think the pain arc was probably the highlight of Shippuden. Past that point was definitely when things started to shift. I was okay with the 5 Kage summon arc, but it was the war that I think really started to mess things up and started to jumble everything up and make it into a mess.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the war especially was where you saw a lot of just shit starting to unravel. The way the Edo Tenseis were handled, the way even Madara was handled before the whole Kaguya debacle. One of the biggest problems I have with the series in general is this notion of villains being manipulated by somebody else, and it's this stack of manipulation where the only real villain, it felt like, was truly Orochimaru. Everyone else was being controlled or manipulated, or somebody was puppeting them to do the things that they did. And to me, that kind of really cheapened the villains, right? Because they became sympathy cases instead of people who really were believable in why they were doing what they were doing. Because, once you find out, oh, well, somebody just kind of like manipulated you to doing all this, is like, oh, damn, you just got tricked, my guy.
Right. And that lines up for so many of the villains. I mean, you could kind of still say that to a degree with, like, I hate to say it, but as far back like as Zabuza, since he was dealing with Gato and them, you could say that kind of sort of with like the Akatsuki, because they wouldn't have come about if they didn't exist for the reasons of, the characters who organized it and all that other stuff and what led to that. And it really sucks. And yeah, Orochimaru is probably definitely the most villain-like because he was somebody who kept control rather than being controlled. And Madara was a step under him because he really seemed like that character as well until the Kaguya stuff started to roll in, and then come to find out he was being manipulated all this time as well, and he really didn't know.
Right. It was a weird sort of, I don't want to say cop-out, but it was a weird, no, it was a cop-out. It was a weird decision, to have Kaguya come in unnecessarily and really just kind of mess things up for everybody. And I don't know, well, I mean, I guess Kishimoto, but who made that final decision, that final call. And it's interesting how writers can really kind of grind something into the dust.
Right.
And I think going off of that, with shonen and things that are super popular, you see a lot of video games that come out, a lot of extra source material, a lot of different characterizations of different characters. Would you say, at least in your experience, that the games do the series justice, and specifically the character of Naruto justice, or are we getting to the point where it just feels like milking garbage, similar to what we experience on some of the Dragon Ball Z titles prior to Fighters and really Raging Blast too? Right.
I think that, I don't know. I think the Storm series is kind of up and down in that regard, because I think the Storm series kind of set a standard for Naruto's games. I feel like I think it's gonna be hard to kind of beat that standard despite its flaws, because I definitely would you say it has some flaws in terms of how it's done story and just in terms of the games themselves. But I believe, for the most part, I think the Storm games did good. I think they did well in terms of justice for a lot of for the characters and in terms of how the story was interpreted. I think the only one that may be a little bit questionable is Storm 3, more so the end off, because that whole thing, and I know that had to do with like the time period that they had, because they left it off with the cliffhanger. Obito got unmasked, and it basically played off as Naruto was in a dream, But outside of that, I think they implemented a lot of things very well. And CC2 did their own thing in some instances as well. That even though it didn't happen, I think it worked really well and it was really cool.
Right. I mean, and for people who don't know, CC2 is CyberConnect 2, the developers of the Storm games, and a few other titles. But yeah, I think that overall the Naruto catalog of games have been pretty good and they stick to the characterization of different characters. They're pretty faithful. There are some outliers like the Naruto Dragon Knight game. I can't remember what it's called.
Dragon Blade Chronicles.
Yes, that. And some of the DS titles, and of course Shinobi Strikers. Titles that make you go, I feel like this is unnecessary. But others that are truly stunning and beautiful, like Storm 4.
For sure.
Which is an astounding looking game.
I think the only other games that I would put up on the pedestal would be the Clash of the Ninja series, the original Ultimate Ninja games, and the two games that were done by Ubisoft on the Xbox, which were Rise of the Ninja, and The Broken Bond. I think those were really good. They did very well with it as well.
Those were pretty fun. And even to me, and I know I might get shit in the comics for it, but Uzumaki Chronicles to me as a kid was dope.
My god.
I really enjoyed those
Uzumaki
titles.
Chronicles, especially 2.
Oh yeah.
I loved Uzumaki Chronicles.
Such a good time. And yeah, I think having Naruto in Jump Force obviously makes a lot of sense because he's a part of the big 3. Not really going to get into the other roster with those poor decisions, but I think even the way he's been portrayed on Jump Force is interestingly accurate. I think that overall he's a very well-rounded character, but a lot of the issues come down to just the writing and not necessarily him inherently as a character. The only thing that irks me about Naruto is the Hinata bullshit and how they got together and how he somehow didn't know that she liked him until like a Genjutsu, even though he kind of acknowledged that he liked her or she liked him in the war arc. That whole situation is fucking weird. It's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, and I would say this because that's one thing brought up in discussion a lot are the couples, the couples of the series, and both of the main couples really don't add up. Naruto and Hinata and Sasuke and Sakura to me, and what ruins it as far as Naruto and Hinata goes is the last Naruto, the last as it's called, and it pretty much makes it seem as though even though Shippuden he must have had some type of idea when Hinata tried to fight Pain, and when Neji had died, and she had smacked some sense into him, that he had noticed something, but the last just makes it seem like he didn't know and forgot everything. The point of the movie was pretty much for their romance that didn't really add up because Naruto was so oblivious to Hinata since the beginning for the most part, and he just comes into the movie, finds out about it, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I love you too, Hinata."
Right? Yeah, and that is not a good way to write. And let us know what your thoughts on the character are, because we are definitely curious to see kind of how the character has aged, and how everyone views him now. Because, like we've been saying, Part 1 Naruto and Shippuden feel very different just because of the world that surrounds them.
Right.
Well, thank you for tuning in, agents. Hit that subscribe button and make sure to check out GohanOXG's channel, which is in the description below. Also, remember to ring that notification bell to stay up to date on all things anime, gaming, and geek. I'll see you guys in the next one. Agent SD3 out.
Peace.